My name is Mary. I just turned 35 this year on a summer day filled with the sound of birdsong. I was called into the president's office. Mom, boss, what can I do for you? The president, who is my mother, spoke curtly without turning her beautiful profile, seemingly bothered by the heat. I've decided to hand the company over to your sister. You're dismissed as of today. The summer sunshine was so blinding that I couldn't quite grasp the reality of what was being said. I guess my voice sounded pretty dumbfounded. My mother, now looking quite exasperated, turned her gaze towards me. Didn't you hear me? You're fired. We don't need ugliness around here. Be gone by the end of the month. With that, she turned her eyes to the documents on her desk, as if indicating our business was done. In the president's office, where only the sound of birds echoed, I was mulling over her words when she reprimanded me. Are you still here? Get back to your work immediately. I stepped back mechanically, like a puppet, said, "Excuse me," and left the office, closing the door behind me. Our company is just a small 2-story building, a demolition business with about 10 employees. The business is family-run, the president being my mother, with my aunt and her husband as the executive directors and my mom's cousins as the managing directors. But it was clear that my mother had most of the power originally. After high school, I worked at an accounting firm. However, when I was 25, my mother told me they didn't have an accountant and asked, "Are you going to abandon your family in trouble? It's you who will be troubled in the end." She pretty much forced me to join our company. Furthermore, the duties assigned to me were not limited to accounting. My mother shoved all the paperwork and miscellaneous tasks onto me whenever there was a shortage of hands. I was even sent out for sales. In short, I was the company's jack of all trades. Still, to not be a burden on others, I worked hard from morning till night and somehow managed to get the work done over the past 10 years. On the other hand, the sister who was to take over the company, Lucy, was 3 years younger than me at 32 and had only been with the company for 2 years before joining us. Lucy had been hopping from one job to another, complaining that they weren't a good fit for her. Once she turned 30, her employment conditions started to deteriorate, and she quit job hunting, spending her days lounging around at home. And then my mother said Lucy should get a job that suits her, and she hired Lucy to join our company as an executive director. I've been with the company for 10 years, but I'm still a regular employee. Everyone was surprised at the difference in treatment between us sisters, but I figured as much. That's because my mother has always favored my sister ever since we were kids. She would give beautiful Lucy any clothes, any toys she wanted, and would fuss over her, saying, "Lucy, you're so cute. This looks so good on you." Lucy, on the other hand, as I wasn't as cute as Lucy, she would give me hand-me-down toys and clothes from my cousins or kids from the neighborhood, saying, "This is good enough for you." I didn't really understand why I was being treated this way. When I was a child, I just worked hard at studying and helping around the house, trying to gain my mother's attention. But even then, my mother barely paid me any mind, and when I handed her my strata report, she would just glance at it. I even considered plastic surgery at one point, thinking that if I wasn't pretty, I wouldn't get any affection. It was my aunt who, upon seeing me in such a state, explained why my mother ignored me so much. When I was in high school, I was told my father had died. But in reality, the year Lucy was born, my father ran off with a woman from his workplace. This woman was older than my mother and supposedly less attractive, and that woman apparently had an aura similar to mine. My aunt, who happens to be my mother's younger sister, casually commented, "Your mom is a proud woman." I bet she couldn't bear the thought of losing her husband to an older woman less attractive than herself. As she spoke, there was a distinct air of satisfaction, as though she took delight in my mother's predicament. By the way, my aunt's appearance wasn't particularly remarkable, leaning more towards my side of the family. Well, she could be a handful, but she was good at her job, mostly used her charm to get ahead. Though she continued, my mother took over the family business at the age of 32 when my father left her. She significantly used her striking beauty to attract and retain numerous clients, which significantly boosted the business performance. I think part of the growth was due to the era, with many buildings needing demolition after reaching their lifespan. Therefore, neither my aunt's family nor my cousins could really go against my mother. Recently, the cost of industrial waste disposal and transportation had increased, and the balance between demolition costs and actual expenses had become difficult to maintain. Not only our company, but the entire industry was underperforming. Honestly, it was a struggle to even pay the employees every month. During these challenging times, my younger sister joined the company as an executive director. I wondered how she would manage to pay her salary, but my mother bluntly said, "We'll cut your salary to pay hers. We're family, that's natural, isn't it? Even if you cut my salary, it's still not enough to pay her a salary fitting an executive director." I made a reasonable argument. However, as always, Mom was relentless, saying, "It's your job to figure that out. Just make it work." Tentatively, I suggested, "Shouldn't Lucy start as a regular employee?" My mother gave me a fierce glare and rebuked, "Who do you think you're talking to? This isn't something for someone like you to interfere with." At that time, we were all living under the same roof. Lucy didn't contribute a dime to the household, whereas I put $1,500 into the household every month. Even when Lucy joined our company, she didn't contribute anything to the house. Since I was young, I had been helping around the house for my busy mother, and naturally did the household chores, whereas Lucy did nothing, as if it was the norm. "Hey sis, is dinner ready yet?" Lucy would call to ask about dinner when I was working overtime. When I told her to make something for herself because I was working, Lucy said, "What? I don't know what to make. The kitchen is your sanctuary, right? I don't want to get scolded for using it without permission. You got mad at me for that before." She never attempted to cook. Using that past incident as an excuse, Lucy never cleaned up after herself and never put things back where they belonged. She often had a grudge for the time I scolded her. I often had to reluctantly come home to prepare dinner, then head back to the office to continue working. My mother usually didn't cook dinner either. Even when I prepared meals, she often just ate out, choosing whatever she felt like eating. However, lately, as my mother frequently went out for business meals with Lucy, I had less need to cook dinner, but the increase in entertainment expenses was causing a new headache. My mother, now 63, was starting to complain more often about various aches and pains and the effects of drinking heavily. It was during such a time that I was called into the CEO's office and told, "I'm handing the company over to Lucy. You, who are not as attractive, are fired." I could understand the decision to hand over the company to Lucy from my mother's past actions. After all, Lucy was 32, the same age my mother was when she became the CEO. Perhaps my mother thought that if the timing was right, Lucy could use her beauty to get work done just like she did. However, I could not accept being fired due to my appearance. Even if my salary was redirected to Lucy, I didn't see the merit in it. When I consulted my aunt, it seemed that the news of Lucy becoming the CEO had already spread among the employees. However, the news of me being fired was news to my aunt as well. After pondering for a bit, my aunt said, "Well, I don't quite understand, but it seems like Lucy has been saying behind the scenes that she doesn't like the fact that even if she tells everyone she's going to do something at the company, everyone says it's okay because they'll ask Mary for help. Maybe that's part of the reason." Indeed, Lucy was utterly incompetent at her job. She always missed deadlines, made mistakes on the phone, and made many typographical errors. My aunt, understanding this point, said, "Well, that's true, but I think she sees you as a nuisance." Continuing on, she lamented, "But I never thought they would fire you. Without you, the company won't be able to function." She sighed, seeming troubled, but didn't go to argue with my mother because she knew she couldn't win. I felt utterly disgusted that I was related by blood to this utterly unreliable aunt. Well, basically, I'm hated by both my mother and my sister, right? I said in a dark voice, to which my aunt, not knowing what to say, responded, "Well, my sister is indeed terrible, but don't you think you'd be better off working somewhere else, given all the skills you have?" "It's a waste to stay here," she suggested. I quit. In her eyes, a faintly kind light of kinship glowed. I stood in the car, bathed in the red glow of the summer twilight, staring blankly at the distant mirage, and felt a sense of release. Maybe it's okay now. And then I turned to my aunt and said, "You're right," with a broad smile on my face. It was the first time since I joined the company that I'd smiled so refreshingly. My aunt, a little puzzled by my smile, returned a somewhat sorrowful smile. So while I was busy creating handover documents, sorting out files so that anyone could understand, the end of the month, when I was to resign, came in the blink of an eye. When I went to the CEO's office on time, the sound of birds was no longer audible, and my mother and sister were happily chatting. "That sales guy definitely has a thing for you." "You, that bald guy? No way." The two of them were laughing heartily, not noticing me. When I cleared my throat, they finally turned around, and my sister looked at me curiously and said, "What's up? If it's about dinner tonight, we don't need it." "I'm resigning today. Thank you for everything." "Oh, is it today? I forgot." She laughed again. I felt refreshed knowing I wouldn't have to see their faces anymore. "I'm also moving out of the house, so please take care of yourselves." My mother mechanically responded, "Okay, good work," with an emotionless face. I closed the door, and from inside I heard my sister's voice saying, "Now we won't have to see that annoying face anymore." In my heart I muttered, "Just you watch," and left the company I'd been at for so long. A week later, when I finished the paperwork for a certain school and checked my phone, I noticed a missed call from my mother. In just 2 hours, she had called 14 times. I didn't return the call, as I only had a bad feeling about it, and put my phone on silent and went home after finishing my other tasks. The missed calls from my mother kept increasing, and when I checked the next morning, there were a total of 80 missed calls. The last call was after 2 a.m. I didn't consider calling her back at all. To me, she was now nothing more than a stranger, and I had no desire whatsoever to hear her voice. I even had fleeting thoughts that if I heard her voice, I might find myself obeying her words. After all, I had been under her control for 35 long years. I ignored her phone calls with all my might, aiming to break free from her spell. I could have blocked her calls, but I thought if something happened, they might serve as evidence of her actions. So I allowed the calls to come through for a while. While I was receiving nearly 100 calls daily at first, I hated even looking at the incoming calls. But gradually, as I got used to it, I felt a sense of satisfaction imagining my mother's face struggling with each unanswered call. I finally realized just how terribly she had treated me. A year passed by in this manner. By then, the calls from my mother had ceased, and I was in a state where I had no clue what was happening with her. Throughout this year, I worked part-time while attending an online school for tax professionals and successfully passed the exams. I have recently secured a job at a leading tax consultancy firm. I had practical experience to begin with, and having done various tasks at my mother's company gave me the ability to see the bigger picture, which proved to be a great asset in my new company. I felt thankful for the hard work I had put in at the company over the past decade, especially at this moment. The people at my workplace are all wonderful, and we work together to get the job done. It's such a huge contrast from when I was left to figure everything out on my own, pushed around by my mother and sister, silently researching on my own and working alone until the middle of the night. One day, while I was leading a fulfilling life, I had to visit a client near my mother's company. As I passed by her company, I noticed the windows and entrance were conspicuously dirty, and I could see the indoor plants that I had cared for now withered. And then, on my way back, I ran into my mother, who was just coming out of her company. As soon as she saw me, she shouted, "Ah," and came running towards me. Expecting her to berate me, I instinctively covered my face with my bag, but to my surprise, my mother approached me in a sweet, cajoling tone, saying, "Where have you been, Mary? I've called you so many times, you know. Did you change your smartphone?" It seems she hadn't even considered the possibility that I might not want to contact her because I despised her. I couldn't help but wonder about her thought process, given all the things she had done to me. Ignoring my baffled expression, she went on, "Oh, but it's a good thing I saw you. Look at the state of this company. It's dreadful, isn't it? You can start working from tomorrow. I'm not angry, you know." "Huh? So I forgive you for leaving a year ago. Please start coming to work from tomorrow." It took me a few seconds to comprehend what my mother had just said. In her mind, was there only an image of a little me crying and adoring her? Mom, I'm already working at another company and I'm happy there." At my hesitant response, her face contorted into something monstrous, and she bellowed, "What? You're telling me you're working somewhere else while our company is in trouble? I don't give a damn about other companies. You're mine, understand?" Causing a scene in the middle of the street. "Wait a minute. You're the one who fired me, isn't it?" My mother seemed a bit startled by the change in my tone. "And the reason you fired me was because I'm ugly, right?" Before I knew it, a crowd had gathered around us, apparently intrigued by our argument. While mindful of the eyes around her, my mother stuttered, "Did I say something like that? Are you sure you didn't mishear?" "No, I heard it very clearly. You're going to hand over the company to my beautiful sister and fire me, the ugly one." "I didn't understand what you meant. I've been working my butt off at the company for 10 years, but you suddenly decided to hand over the company to my sister, who barely does any work after just 2 years. I question your judgment." As I explained this clearly, the crowd began to stir. "Really? Can that happen? That's awful, isn't it? Is she her own mother? Are they two related by blood? Some people even started filming us." I was so angry I didn't care about that. As my mother started sweating and turning pale under the collective glares of blame from around her, she started to panic. "Mary, you're misunderstanding. Let's go inside for now." "Misunderstanding? What am I misunderstanding? If you didn't say such a thing, shouldn't you be able to clearly say it wasn't like that?" When my mother fell silent, the people around us started to say, "Oh, she's silent, so it's true. That's unbelievable." Then something seemed to snap in my mother. She started shouting, "Shut up. It's all your fault for being ugly and gloomy. Ugly people should know their place and obediently do what beautiful people say. That's all you're good for." People around us were taken aback by her outrageous behavior and began to upload their videos quickly. "The ugly woman obeys the beautiful woman." The thumbnail headlines were like that. The video went viral to my mother's clients, and she was soon told to cease all transactions with all companies. It seems that in the year after I left the company, they were engaged in a lot of shady activities, like fraudulent registration and tampering with the accounting books. So when the video spread, everyone seemed happy to distance themselves. Naturally, the company went bankrupt, and my mother and sister, who had lost their source of income, came to my apartment. But of course, I didn't open the door. In the end, they moved to a 45-year-old apartment with no bath, living in fear of their creditors, working part-time because my sister always tried to take it easy by flirting with the male employees. Due to her beauty, she was disliked by her fellow part-timers and had to change her part-time job frequently. As for my mom, everyone knew about the video that had spread on the internet, and she was being distanced by her part-time work colleagues. It seems she's just silently working by herself. Meanwhile, I found a boyfriend at my new workplace. He's not handsome, but he told me he likes me because I work very seriously and sincerely. We're planning to get married soon. I'm spending my days feeling truly glad that I've been diligent all this time.